Well, welcome to the very first live cast of Relationship Matters. I am so glad that you're joining us. And if you're not live and you're watching this later, thank you for watching. I know that this hour is going to be very rich in content because I am going to be introducing you to Jack Toth in just a few minutes. And when he and I get talking, we basically save the world every single time. So and we're just such good friends. But Jack is brilliant, and I'm going to introduce him in a minute. I wanted to share with you just for a moment what this is all about. I wrote a book called Relationship Matters, as many of you know, and I felt like it needed more discussion. And so I thought, well, what's the best way to do that than a live cast? And I thought also I'd love to hear from guests and experts and real life people that have gone through struggles. I would love to hear from them on their context and some of the subject matter within the book. So today we're going to be talking about trust and how to build trust, how to regain trust, all things trust in our relationships. And these are all relationships. I'm not going to be just covering, husband and wife or family relationships, although that will be some weeks we might solely focus on that. Most of the time we're going to be focused on all relationships, work, in our organizations, in our families, in every area, because I believe this: everything flows out of relationship. Everything. We were designed for relationship. And so everything we do flows out of that. And when those relationships are hurt, when we're struggling in them, our whole life struggles. Every area of our life starts to struggle. And so this live cast / podcast is going to be a discussion around relationships and how to have healthy ones and how to live life out. It's really just a journey. We're inviting you to listen in on our conversation. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jack Toth. Jack, I'm going to read his bio, even though I could tell you it because I've lived most of it with him as a friend, but I'm going to read it because it's really fantastic. Jack is, in my books, he's one of the four pioneers of youth ministry and youth work in the country, and that's really good. So Jack Toth's life goal is to equip youth and those who support them to never come to the place of hopelessness which he experienced at the age of 16. Jack and his wife Colette Toth co-founded Impact Society, an Alberta-based charitable organization, in 1994. That's amazing. Look at the longevity. Serving as founder and CEO of the organization, Jack authored and developed the Heroes suite of programs. Heroes programs are unique in that they are evidence-based, strength-focused character education programs and processes. And as somebody who has experienced them, and any of you that have heard me teach, you have experienced them because it's so ingrained in me. It's part of who I am. You know the benefit of this. These have received national recognition within the character development education sector. In addition, Jack has been involved in creating the creation of Indigenous education and leadership, providing innovative cultural, appropriate training, educational, and coaching programs for Indigenous communities. To date, over 250,000 youth and adults nationally and internationally have participated in Impact Society programs. That's an outstanding achievement. Jack has also authored a Canadian best-selling book called The Teacher Every Student Wants and Needs. And it's an excellent book and an excellent read because it's from a story point of view, but it brings the principles out. It's a really good book. I encourage you to get it. An international speaker, Jack has taken his experience of mental and emotional struggle as a youth and life experience as an adult to communicate a relational positive message which audiences from youth to seniors say is compelling and transformational. And I'm one of those who was transformed by Jack's messages. I also personally want to say he's also a great husband to Colette and a dad to his 3 boys and their wives and his plethora of grandkids. I can't keep up with how many are coming along. Jack, it's so good to have you here. That was a mouthful, but it's so good to have you here. We've known each other for over 30 years. And I often tell the story. I won't do it here today, but you didn't know it because we didn't know each other, but you impacted my life dramatically one day. And it was the catalyst for me actually being where I am today. And then to have the honor and privilege to work together for all those years and to co-develop Heroes and all that kind of stuff together, it's just been amazing. Jack, welcome to Relationship Matters Livecast.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark. It is such a privilege to be here. And um, with age, what you recognize is that for me, especially, that term best friend tightens significantly. And you are one of the two or three that I have, where I used to have quite a large network. You really find over time.
It's yeah,
Uh,
it's true, isn't it? You know, a lot of
it is.
times in relationships we bail too soon. We have a bit
Mhm.
of a hiccup or a struggle, and we just jump out, and we kind of lose. Think about if you and I had an offense in some way, which we're going to talk about in a bit, and we
Mhm.
walked away from each other forever. What would we have lost? We
Yeah.
wouldn't even know what we lost, because all of those times we were together and had these incredible conversations shaped us, shaped our lives, shaped our faith, shaped everything. And so it's really incredible. And I just, if I could say anything to our watchers, it's like, don't give up too soon. you
Mhm.
know Keep pressing in. Jack, tell the audience just a little bit about your journey. I alluded to it in your bio. You really struggled as a teenager with self-esteem, obviously, and maybe just share a bit of that story.
Sure, I will. And Mark, I will say, just because I don't want to forget the thought that
Yeah.
uh, when I reflect on our friendship, and you and I frequently talk about how our conversations, when we get to have them,
Yeah.
tend to be um, almost transformative in some area. It might be a very small thing, but it tends to lead to a key statement and recognition.
Hmm.
And why is that? It's because I know that I can trust you with my heart.
Mm.
And we often can expect to have a deep relationship with someone else or hope to have a deep relationship with someone else when we don't genuinely know if we can expose our heart to them and it's not safe. And the reality is, if
Mm.
we're feeling that we're holding back a piece of us for some reason, we've
Yeah.
probably got a good friendship, but it hasn't progressed to that deep relationship.
Right.
And I struggled with that for years.
Yeah.
In growing up, I grew up in a loving home, but where I wasn't told that.
Mm.
I've said to many people, I in my life never once heard my dad say, "I'm proud of you." I
Yeah.
heard it be hinted uh, when I was in my 30s and was speaking at an event that he happened to be there, and we were there was just there were powerful outcomes from the speaking. And an individual came and talked to my dad and said, "Wow, you Chuck's dad? You must be proud." And that's the closest, because I was in earshot talking to someone else, but all of a sudden I'm listening to that conversation rather than mine. And my dad said to them, "Yeah, yeah, I am," or "Yes," or something like that, or nodded his head. That's the closest I got, but at least I got that.
Yeah.
Not blaming my dad.
Not at all.
They were raised in that environment where you didn't brag about build up your kids because you didn't want them to get puffed up.
Right.
So as a
Right.
result, I went through my life equating relationship with parents, equating relationship with a father as measuring up.
Right.
And if I didn't measure up, I knew it. But when
Mm.
I did measure up, I never heard it.
Right.
So the consequence is I never knew where the boundaries were. So you build in a sense of self expectation, and unspoken expectations are always unmet expectations.
Yeah.
So you build in your own theory or your own box of what the
Yeah.
expectations. needed to be. And my translation of that, my contextualization of that was perfection.
Wow.
And if I wasn't achieving perfection, I was a failure,
Right.
which led to the point when I was 16 years old of me walking into the house. I'm supposed to go out and help my brother with the farm work, and instead go get his hunting rifle off the shelf. And I'm ready to blow my brains out
Mm.
because I was convinced if I couldn't be perfect, I couldn't be loved.
Wow.
And if I couldn't be, and that even we came from a faith-based home, and I do not doubt my parents' commitment to faith, commitment to a faith relationship. But
Mhm.
we came from a faith-based home where the reflection for me was to genuinely have faith, you had to live a perfect life.
Right.
So I came to the place of my self-belief, my contextualization
Mm.
of success was perfection.
Wow.
And in order for God to see me as a success and others to see me as a success, and it was only perfection that made me worth loving.
Right.
It was only that I could genuinely be loved by others. And at
It's an
16, I
incredible
came to the
pressure.
point, yeah, I came to the point of seeing this is impossible. So just finish the job now,
Right.
quit struggling. Fortunately, didn't do that. In coming out of it at the age of 17, there were numerous factors. In coming out of it at the age of 17, there actually was a gentleman who began to spend more time with me, although he had no idea. I did not tell that story of my
Mhm.
close to suicide until I was 34, until my mom passed away, because I knew it would devastate her
Right.
to hear it and hear her part in it. Totally unintentional.
Yeah.
Her just doing what she thought would actually build success for me.
Right.
Um, so it wasn't until I was 34 that I began to share that story. And so even in you alluded to, I'll just summarize it like this. So now, as we're talking to young people and the principles that came out of that, and principles that when you worked with Impact Society, you really um, were a key individual to help really expand the understanding of that and how that understanding works. But it was I recognized these principles. I was given these direction on these principles that I was raised in a behavior-based environment,
Mm.
and what you experienced was based on how you behaved.
Right.
And the reality is, we as people, which I learned later, the science of change shows that we all, in order to change, need to move from feeling to thought to behavior to conviction.
Right.
And in establishing, even well before I knew that, and I
Talk.
went into work where go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, break that when you finish your thought, but
Yeah, yeah,
break that down a little bit for
sure, I
the
will.
audience. Yeah.
Hey, and so what happened was I went into youth work because I committed my life to helping young people never get to that dark place. I can
Mhm.
still, if I close my eyes, I can I can go back in an instant to what it was like looking at that cold blue steel of that rifle, staring
Mm.
at it sitting on my lap.
Wow.
Um, and it wells up in me, and that's what drives me. That to help young people never get to that spot and help the adults who
Mm.
support them help youth never get to that spot. And so went into youth work. And you know the story about I was asked to volunteer in a junior high school in Calgary, a public school, and they liked the way I worked with youth and eventually asked me to write a leadership program that they wanted to use as a curricular resource for grades 8s and 9s. and wrote the first iteration of Heroes. I feel sorry for those young people when I look back. I think it was 120 or 130 pages of print.
I remember.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to refer to that. We'll see if we get a chance to what you had to do to help us refine that dramatically. But um, that's even a trust thing, so I'll try and get to it. But
Yeah.
where the question I had asked myself when I was asked to do this is, what would 13-year-old Jack have needed so he
Right.
didn't almost commit suicide? And I realized I didn't need to focus on behavior. I need somebody to show me who I really was,
Right.
to show me that I had strengths, to show me that I had a capacity to contribute.
Yeah.
That's where I needed to start. So that's why Heroes, every program in Impact Society starts with confidence.
Yeah.
But then the reality is, we all have barriers we put up around our lives, and we put up the barriers not because we're bad people. I believe I could meet with a person who's in jail for murder and walk through them to the place to see that in their primary areas of life, they have these deep strengths, but they put up barriers, put up walls around it as a self-protective mechanism because the strengths are so easily hurt.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I recognized, yeah, we have to build confidence first, but if you don't help a person develop character, and I always use at that point when I was building this, there was a 13-year-old boy in Northeast Calgary that I did not know, but the police had told me about, who could steal a Trans Am in under 45 seconds, so they could never catch him. He would steal it, joyride, hand it off to older guys to joyride it, and they could never catch him. And I said, so here we are. If we build a self-esteem program, now we've got a confident car thief. How do we help character be built so the young person understands, so any person understands, why am I making the decisions I'm making?
Right.
And how do I now begin to process my decision making so I'm building my strengths?
Right. And in fact, it's actually the character in the end. It was the character and using that character and the strengths to do good that created the confidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It
goes together, right?
It's
like
cyclical. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like when you start to gain a little confidence and then you add character to it, it builds more confidence.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a confidence, character, integrity, and it keeps the confidence growing.
Yeah.
And integrity, the foundational values.
Yeah.
Because I have values, you have values, and we all think our values are the foundational values, and as a result, we tend to not genuinely listen to others.
Right.
But there are the foundational values, the honesty, the integrity, the genuine relationships are the foundational values that keep the confidence growing and the character strong.
Trustworthy.
And then conviction.
Yeah.
Ultimately, conviction is the purpose. If to have great confidence, good decision-making skills, but then not put it into practical application can be a real, I would say, waste of time. It can also be one of the biggest discouragements that people face, because we can, in life, we can go through great training programs, and if we don't understand how to pragmatically now put this in action to build a future that strengthens me and strengthens the world around me, we tend to give up. So
right. Well, and I was thinking while you were talking there, Jack, I didn't see it this way before, but when we put those barriers up, when we put the walls around our heart, it's difficult to trust because we don't trust ourselves. If we had any kind of, trust in our own ability, we wouldn't put the walls up. And so that's where it circles back to this idea, because I believe that trust is a component of integrity, because if you have integrity, then you're trustworthy. And if you're trustworthy, you're able to trust. So if I can't trust myself, how can I trust others? It breaches that, what I call a pillar, foundational pillar in relationships. And so when we're behind the walls, that, in our illustration of the walls and the water, it's always it's two things happen. One is we get identified by the walls, and the other is we make decisions from those walls.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually make decisions from that inability to trust, or inability to, out of not being able to make the right decisions, or whatever. And so we make decisions from the walls instead. And that's where we get angry. We do all kinds of things to do that. And then we're not trustworthy. And then so people don't trust us, and the cycle continues.
Mark, you have hit it. And that cycle continuing and becoming so discouraging.
Yeah.
And that we try to take down someone else's walls by pointing out, can't you see this is wrong?
Yeah.
Rather than, and this is what we say over and over to young people, here's your strengths. Yeah. This is who you really are. This is who you're designed and created to be. And so, and here's opportunities. Here's what can, here's who you could really be.
Yeah.
But these walls you put up, whether it's addiction or hatred or anger or bullying, they're limiting factors. And it's not just identifying the walls. And as you just said, we put up walls as a self-protective mechanism around our heart. Yeah. Now others identify us from the wall: the loser, the hopeless person, the lousy parent, the bully, the person who's
jerk.
Full of whatever, full of unhealthy pride, whatever it is. So then others, that's how people identify the walls. The challenge is then we begin to identify ourselves. So even when we begin to recognize and see our strengths, in the back of our mind, we go, yeah, but this is actually who I am because I've identified myself to that.
Right.
So we help others identify the walls, but then we help them see what can be accomplished if they take down the walls.
Right.
Here's your strengths. Here's who you can really become. These are the limiting factors. I'll help you take them down if you want. Right. And in my life, and you and I have both talked about this, I have never met one person who wants to live from their walls.
Yeah.
Every person, once they come to this recognition of internal strengths and who they really are, that's this magnetic heartbeat. That's who I want to become.
Yeah.
And so I believe we all need support to take down the walls, but that takes people we trust. And I was going to go back to referring to heroes when we talked about it. So here's Mark, and it moves his family to Calgary, and we've got nothing. Colette and I are living on a wing and a prayer, and more prayers than wings, kind of thing. And you move because you believe that this can go somewhere. This Impact Society, this Heroes program can go somewhere. And I still remember we worked hard to get some money in, and then started to get a little bit of momentum, and then it came. The Heroes program had to be rewritten, and I remember when you said to me, Jack, you had me dictate. I dictated everything. How I ran classes, I dictated every single, because I'd been doing this now for a number of years.
Yeah.
And you were saying, Jack, we've got to take your brain and what you've been doing into something that others can use. And I gave all the information, and I'm expecting to be sitting with you doing it. And you said, no, you cannot show up because we have to cut at least 60% of this material. I still remember how upset I was. But there was one reason I was able to say yes. And that is because I trusted you. Right. Because of the sacrifice you and your family made. To come and build something you could see.
Right.
That I was struggling to see. Yeah.
Wow, there's a real clue in there, isn't there? That's a great example of how we can build trust with others. And actually make a difference rather than telling them, that they have walls and what those walls are. What if we
Right.
just saw something that they're struggling to see and we pointed out? That's
Absolutely.
that's the secret sauce to the Heroes program, has always been that we're able to see in the heart of those young people and see what they actually are. I always say perception's reality. It's not always actuality. Their perception was very real to them, that they maybe were not loved, that they like you yourself, you had to perform. You actually had to perform to to be loved. Well, that's not true. That's not who you
Right.
are, right? But it was a lie you believed because you felt it. And
Right.
so imagine in that moment of your life, and then you said somebody started taking interest. It's like they spoke to that person in you that was actually loved. And
Mhm.
and and I think that's the secret sauce, Jack. I love that even made you emotional, because for me, it wasn't like a huge sacrifice. And yes, we packed up a family and moved with no knowledge of where we were going to live or how we were going to live, but we did it because we couldn't not do it,
Mm.
because the vision of this of investing in young people was in my heart too. And I saw the results of what you were doing. I remember hours and hours on the phone together, before you, like as you were starting to teach the first iterations, and we were talking, and then I got to write that down, and you'd make
Mm.
shifts and changes, and then you'd say something. It's like, I got to write that down. And that's how it kind of came about, but it was founded on trust.
Mhm.
So what builds trust for you, Jack? What are the things that you think are the ingredients? In my book, I refer to three areas, and I'm not going to mention them because I want to hear you. Three areas that will build trust equity in a relationship. But what for you personally? Like you mentioned that the sacrifice we made built trust. You could trust me. What are some other things for you, that maybe somebody could hear there if they're really struggling with feeling trusted, or trusting others? Because I find the reason it's the first pillar in the book was because trust is probably the biggest destroyer of relationships.
Mhm.
A lack of trust, and it's so hard to trust. It's hard to trust authorities when you've had negative experiences. It's hard to trust yourself. It's hard to trust, and that when you can't trust, you are actually condemning yourself to have walls around your heart.
Yeah.
We have to find that pathward to trust. So what are some things that you could share with us that build trust, or where somebody could discover that trust again?
Yeah. For me, a huge one is somebody genuinely interested in me, and I don't say that as a selfish thing.
Yeah.
Are they actually interested in my heart, in who I really am, in what drives me?
Yeah.
Are they interested in my vision? It's not that they have to jump on board, but are they interested in? And that comes from, do they genuinely want to hear?
Yeah.
Uh, that's where, with Colette, my wife, she's just been so amazing in that she could hear this vision for youth, and even when it was so far out there, and the sacrifice like way beyond anything that you should expect any wife or mom to go through.
Yeah.
She was willing to, because she could hear my heart,
Hmm.
and got on board with it. So it's not, when somebody, I'll say this, Mark, it's to let somebody expose their heart, and that you genuinely know when you can speak to it and when you just be quiet and listen.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Because,
often say, listening, active listening to not just what's being said, but why it's being said, actually gives you a voice.
right,
We always
yeah,
want our voice to be heard first. And then when it's rejected, we either stop talking or we start yelling, and
right,
and we lose our voice. But if we truly want to be able to speak into somebody's life, we earn that privilege. We earn that right by listening,
hmm
by understanding their heart, I always say, speak from the heart, not the pain. And
Right.
it's like people ask me, well, what do you mean? And I said, you want to speak from the heart, who you truly are. You want to be transparent with who you really are. You don't want to speak from the pain of experiences and hurt and when people have hurt you, because your angry voice is never heard.
Right.
It's never truly heard. And so when we can speak from our heart, I can say the same thing. I can say, Jack, I am hurt. My feelings are hurt by you. Or I can say, you always hurt me. And it's a very different, right, connotation. But when we know we're heard and loved, I love what you said, because transparency is one of my things for the trust pillar. It's like when you said that, Jack, it just really resonated. It's like when we take the time to really care about the person's heart and what they see, what they feel, what they believe, it builds trust so quickly. So quickly. So you and I have been friends a long time. And by the way, we've had some comments. Thank you so much to the people that are watching. And I want to just say, if you have questions, put them in there, because we'll answer some questions after our discussion. So don't be scared to ask a question on there. We're seeing the comments in the thing here, and we'll answer the questions if we can get to them.
Can I speak to one more thing about building trust, Mark, that I found is vitally important, and it became a part of the Heroes program. I haven't known how much I would have to use it for myself, but it became part of the Heroes program when we talk about taproot principles.
Yes.
And how each of us have foundational taproot principles. And people, as you know, from the Heroes, people say, well, family is my taproot. And we said, no, family can't be your taproot. Right. Because have you ever been let down by family? Right. Taproot principles are those unchangeables like love, confidence, purpose, perseverance, faith, many things like that, honesty, trust.
Things that nobody could take away from me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that if your family lets you down and you got a taproot principle, let's say of perseverance or trust, it's okay, how do we rebuild the trust? So I'm going to say by how do you build trust? And for me, I've also recognized that it's really knowing another person's taproot principles. I'll give try and give a quick story about Colette. Right. Now, as we've gone through this, because we've got Heroes at Home, which is the parenting Colette, and I love to do parenting programs. And if people want to look things up, then go to impactsociety.com.
Yeah, I'll post it
impactsociety.com. Yeah. So right at the start, Colette's three, I believe, are trust and honesty. I think it's honesty and then trust. So, all right, taproot principles. And so a quick example that actually happened. I had promised her I'd be home. I'm pretty sure it was 5:30, so that we would have dinner together with the kids and that kind of thing. And so it's like 10 to 5, and either I made a phone call or I took a phone call. I can't remember that. That took 20, 30 minutes. I should have just, no, I need to do this the next day. But I didn't. Yeah. Because why? Oh, because this person must have needed Jack in order for this call to happen. So I made the call. Now I'm late leaving the office because the office is 15 minutes from home. I have 10 minutes to go at least. Well, that's not too bad. Oh, shoot. I promised her I'd stop for a few groceries on the way home. Pull into the grocery store, and it's Safeway. And I'm walking through. Of course, there's the flower department right away. And so I think Colette loves flowers. So I buy some flowers, pick up the stuff, get home at least half an hour late. Walk in the door with flowers, thinking this is going to be great. She's going to love it. And Colette's response is pretty cold. And Colette, like cold for her is not cold like some people, just not her normal warm. Yeah. Colette's an incredibly warm lady. And it's just not what I was expecting. Let's put it that way. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And it was later, and I can't remember how it came to, but it came to the, I had promised I'd be home at 5:30. And this was yet another time I wasn't. And it was the straw that really broke the camel's back on.
The Colette's back.
Yeah, Colette's back on trust.
Yeah.
But now I brought flowers. So what was I trying to do? Bribe her
Yeah.
for lying.
Yeah.
And so in trust, when we're building trust with others, and and what are their love languages? Colette's primary love language is time spent with.
Right.
Mine is gifts.
Right.
I thought bringing her something that was my love language
Yeah.
would make her thrilled, totally missing what her love language is, time spent with. You really love us. You will be spending time with me
Right.
and our family.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasted money on flowers.
Oh, I think after a while she got over it and enjoyed the
Yeah.
color, but because she
Yeah.
loves flowers and still does.
Yeah. I often use that illustration with Sandy. I cleaned the house for her one time because, I just top to bottom.
Because you're such a good guy.
Yeah, because I just wanted to tell her I loved her and whatever.
Yeah.
And she walks in the door and opens the closet to hang her coat up and says, "Oh man, there's dust bunnies. This place is a mess. I need to clean it up." I just finished all that labor, and I was so wounded. And so then when we did the love language test like years later, we realized, oh, hers is time spent. All I had to have done is take her out for coffee. I could have saved myself 2 hours of housework. And of course, mine was his words of affirmation. So she says,
Right.
"Oh, this place is a mess." It just poked my failure thing, that fear of failure, right? And so
Yeah.
the battle was on, and so it's so true. And so things like that, you see, sometimes we break trust and we don't know it. I always tell people, you're either making deposits into the trust bank or you're making withdrawals. Problem is, when you're making deposits because you do it intentionally. You don't know when you're making withdrawals.
Right.
And so you need to make sure you're making more deposits than withdrawals. And it's interesting, the illustration you use, because the other point, so transparency is one way to build trust. The other one is keeping your word.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Say what you mean what you say.
Yeah.
So that's really good. So Jack, I want to just move into this story you and I were talking about before we came on, because people might be mistaken thinking, oh, well, those guys get along great. They never have conflict. They have so much trust in each other. I need to mention that the trust that Jack and I have in each other isn't because we did well all the time.
Right.
Sometimes it's because we messed up. We made trust withdrawals. But there was something, I think there's a principle to be discovered here in this conversation about that. And so, I remember the story, where you were talking about, maybe you can just mention it, like where you started to feel me pull away a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe just start from there.
Well, there was the time that when you were working with Impact, and I felt this pulling away and just didn't know. I guess the greatest fear in me is that, oh, somebody's pulling away because they don't like me, or I've offended them. So, and it really triggered that fear. And so
you weren't perfect.
Yeah, there you go. Weren't perfect. I screwed up. So, which it may be true, but it's not the yeah. Anyhow, so I felt you pulling away, couldn't get to the bottom of it. And it's funny how we were talking, and I was just reflecting on it last week, how this situation. And why don't you explain it? And then just talk about it briefly, and we can maybe address.
So what happened was we had done some work. We were starting to get recognized. Part of my role at Impact Society was to raise funds and to get the awareness out there more. And so I worked pretty hard, and we ended up winning an award in Alberta called the Red Wagon Award that was presented to us by the Premier. And Jack knew I was working on it and doing stuff, but I don't think he realized the significance of it, or that it would be the Premier of the province actually presenting it. So I'm giving my perspective. He'll give you his in a minute. So my perspective was, so at the last minute, literally the morning of this event where they're going to present us with this award, he comes to me and he says, I think it's just it. I didn't realize, the Premier was presenting this, and I'm having a dinner with them tomorrow night. I think it would just be better if I went and was there and did that. And so we went together to the event, but you ended up going up and receiving the award, and something entered into my heart. I always tell people, nobody can offend you. You choose to be offended.
Mhm.
And in that situation, I was offended. I was like, well, maybe he doesn't need me, because I go to my fear of failure. Maybe I haven't done enough, or maybe he just doesn't need me anymore. And if he's always, and there was a bit of jealousy, like, why is he getting the limelight? I'm the one that did all the work on this. And so,
Mhm.
but it's amazing what can happen. And yet this is two men who trust each other and have built something wonderful together. And yet I couldn't, like, it just lodged in there. And I kind of pushed it off, probably more likely pushed it down. And so
Mhm.
when I pushed it down, I believe that that's why I started to distance myself. I was in a place where I was open to um, that disappointment, and I left a gap open. And so my trust was a little bit on the waning side. It wasn't that I didn't
Mhm.
trust your heart, but at that moment I couldn't trust your actions.
Right.
And so and that can get confusing sometimes for people. So that's my side of the story. So
Yeah.
I wasn't consciously pulling away, but I think that I didn't really deal with that. And what I should have done is come talk to you right away. And I
Right.
didn't. I carried the offense for a little bit. And that's a real clue for anybody listening. Don't
Yeah.
carry offenses. Keep short accounts, because offenses will create breaches of trust really quickly. But go ahead, Jack. Share your
Well,
side.
and I'm going to say, especially in marriage too, don't keep offenses. Like, talk things through.
Oh,
But I'm going to come to this situation,
yeah.
and the reason I was even reflecting on it last week, not because you and I had talked about it, but it came back to me for some reason. I don't even know why. I just came back to me, that whole situation, and inside I went, "What was I thinking?" Um, the relationship you and I have, to me, what is so obvious, and I can't go back and do it, but is when I should just come and said, Mark, here's how things are shaping up. How can we do this? I think we probably within 15 minutes would have been, well, let's do it together, because we did kind of everything together with Impact by then.
Yeah.
Because it made sense. Yes, I was invited to this dinner that the premier was at. The next premier and his wife were at the next night. And also, what was notable about the Red Wagon, it was both of them, uh, because that was the first time the Red Wagon had been given out. We were in that first group, and you
Yeah.
managed to have us in that inaugural group of 8, I think, from across the province.
Mhm.
So, but I would say, so how do you build trust? It's, well, I made what at that time I would have looked at as a pragmatic decision from Impact's side. Well, this is the right decision because I'm with the premier tomorrow night. So
Right.
this way he'll remember my name, rather than us having a discussion around it.
Right.
And yeah, and to me it would have been, well, let's both do it because we're in this together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so taking a bit of extra time,
Right. So
and it
that's
would
such
have
a
taken
good
a long time.
it's such a good illustration for teams that, if there's people that are working in organizations or in companies right now, they're all in chaos because of this COVID thing and all the reactions to it. And it's just so important to understand perception is reality. It's not always actuality. My perception was you didn't need me, and you actually pushed me off the stage. I'm saying it harshly. I
Yeah,
didn't feel
yeah,
it that harsh, but
yeah.
and your perception was this is better for the organization, and I am the face of the organization, and I'm gonna, I need it's better for everything, and so I'm gonna do this. I think if everybody slows down a little bit and kind of does a quick sweep of how is my decision going to affect other people? How is it going to affect my team? How is it going to affect my whatever? If we just slowed down enough to do that, we would probably find we would have a lot more wisdom in our decisions,
Mhm.
and we have an opportunity for building trust. Because imagine, let's, and we don't have to, and by the way, everybody, we're long over that. I'm just using this story as an illustration. But what would have happened had you thought it through and then you came to me and said, Mark, we need to be up there together. This is a reward for both of us and for the whole organization. Do you know what that would have done in my heart? That
Mm.
would have so you can see it would have like affirmed me. It would have all that. But you know what? I should have been affirmed anyway. I shouldn't have needed the recognition to be affirmed. I should have been satisfied with a job well done and done that. But because of my own insecurities. So you can see how all the walls around our heart come into play all the time. And so then, then I start the self-talk, and then I start spiraling down, and then
Right.
whatnot. And the interesting thing, Jack, is that it wasn't right away, but it did, for the first time, have me think. I thought I was going to literally, work at Impact until I died. It was the first time that I had entertained that I could go somewhere else and do what I'm doing. And I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't have allowed that. So I had to take responsibility for allowing that. So I remember had already moved away, already in Kelowna, and running the organization I came to run here. And I remember being back in Calgary, and you and I were sitting in the car, and I was terrified to do it, but I felt like I had to come out with it and say, you know what, I'm over it, Jack, but I need to tell you that hurt my heart. And your response was just beautiful, and it healed anything that might have been there. But I brought it up because I discovered my relationship with you, my friendship with you, is far more important than an offense that happened many years ago or many minutes ago. And I think that's a clue for trust equity and trust building. Is I want to value the person greater than the offense that might have been taken.
Right. I appreciate that, Mark, and I think too, and this isn't to do with the story, but when you're talking about what builds trust and what tears down trust, accusation tears down trust very quickly.
Yeah.
And it may even be an accusation that in some measure could seem warranted, because there was an action that led to the accusation.
Right.
But then we just start shooting. You are this, you are this, you are this. And we identify the person from the accusation.
Right.
Not from who they really are.
Again, the behavior.
The walls.
Yeah.
And
the walls.
And as you're so familiar with in Heroes, as we're talking about it, whether it's a marriage relationship or friendship, your kids in school, your own children, a genuine relationship, a genuine friendship is with someone who knows how to build your strengths and help you take down or keep down the walls.
Right.
And I can never take down your walls. You can never take down mine.
That's right.
But we can support each other to see what they are and to see the powerful outcome that can happen by taking them down and be there when we need help. Right. A significant transition I've gone through in the last year. In hindsight, what I really recognize I should have done, and this is where I'm not just putting in a plug for you, but you help people. You're really good at this. Is I would recommend anyone going through a significant transition, especially if you're transitioning to, maybe handing over to someone else, those kinds of things. You spend at least 6 months interacting with an outside party around it, because for each of us individually, we do not recognize how emotionally we potentially are tied to things.
Yeah.
And so what we're saying with our mouth is something we genuinely, with our mind, believe and think, but it's not necessarily our heart.
Right.
And we will continue to act from our heart rather than our mind. So maybe not letting go of some things that we need to. And so that's where I appreciate you and your strength so much, is your capacity to help a person really comprehend maybe their thought process or what their actions are showing that are different than they're mentally thinking, because you're able to help people see what the heart is actually doing and leading them.
It's the cause and effect. Everybody has cause and effect. So there's something that caused the behavior, and it's usually in the heart, but we're searching for it in the behavior. We're searching for it in the attitude, in the soul, when we really should be searching for it in our spirits. And when we get that answer, it just changes itself. There's not much more to do. You realize, the epiphany happens, and it's easy to let go and take that wall down, because you have the cause and effect And so that's important. Well, we're at
We're really
I can't
close.
believe how fast this went.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get the story about you, but you have to be off when? 1:55?
Well, I've
Or
got a
3:59?
3 o'clock hard, like a 2:59
Yeah.
hard stop. I can avoid going to the washroom before then. I will say, Mark, too, like a lot of people that you're probably in your audience, maybe they're struggling with relationships with their kids.
Yeah.
It's something I learned. I was very fortunate. My oldest son came to me at one point, not that long ago, just within the last few years, last couple of years, when he and I had an interaction around something, and he said, "Dad, can we go for supper?" So he talks best when he's on a hike. He loves the outdoors, and so we went on a hike. And he was finally just very honest with me, and he said, "Dad, when I call you and talk to you about things, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen to me."
Yeah.
And he said, "I always feel like you're trying to fix things. And if I want to really have a relationship with you, but I can't really have a relationship with you if you're always trying to fix things."
Wow.
And I remember at that time wanting to respond and say, "No, shut up, be quiet," and just sitting and listening and letting him talk and hearing his heart. And then going to my other two sons and saying, and preparing them. Well, one of them, it happened quite spontaneously. The other one, I set up, I phoned or text them, I think, and said, "Here's what I'd like to do." Because the second son, he talked to me. It's a situation that happened that created the openness. Where I was actually apologizing to him where I would have hurt him. Kind of thought I'd covered the ground, and then he goes, "Dad, can I say something here? When I would screw up and you'd be so mad." He said, "I was already beating myself up for it. I knew I'd screw up. I just really needed a hug so that I knew you still loved me.
Wow.
And when you reacted the way you would react and tell me again and again what I did wrong,
Wow.
that really hurt." And then our youngest son, it was more around, again, the fixing, like being careful. It always felt like I was trying to give them direction in life rather than really just listening to their heart, and then when the time is right, saying, "Well, here's what I feel."
Wow.
Yeah.
Jack, thanks for the transparency on that. And that was so powerful. If you're listening today and you're watching this, whenever you watch it, and you're having relational conflict with your kids, especially, Jack just gave you the pathway. He gave you the pathway to reconciliation. Just listen. Don't get defensive. You don't need to defend anything. They're giving you their perception. And you have to honor their perception. It is reality. It's very real to them. Even if you didn't mean it, it's still real to them. That's what they experienced. Let's not deny somebody's experience. By listening, what happened there is Jack was able to then be able to give the actuality. I've often said the one success I've had in parenting, if I've only had one, is to admit when I was wrong, to be able to take responsibility for when I mess up, and even when I didn't intend to. So it's not about defensiveness. I want to encourage you, just listen to their hearts.
Right.
Create space and grace so that they can share their hearts. And the same will work for a team member. The same will work for a family member. The same will work for a neighbor, whoever you're in relationship with. And here's a zinger. The same will work for you.
Right.
If you slow down enough to hear your own heart instead of judging it, be curious. Ask the question, why? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Give yourself space and grace to actually discover the cause and effect. Because if you can do that, you will have breakthrough.
Right.
Isn't that true,
Well,
Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, there's so many places we could go here, Mark.
Well,
I'm
let's have a
disappointed
second.
in you.
Let's have you back on,
Yeah,
and
but
let's
I was
do this
a
again because
little,
I want to honor your time. It's
yeah.
1:55.
Well, a little, just a little tidbit of
Yeah.
people right now, especially kind of 40, 45 and up, talk about millennial and as a Gen Z, on how they just don't want to work. And you know what I've discovered? That is so far from the truth.
Yeah.
When in this generation, I think they've got a lot of things right.
Yeah.
If you really connect with their heart,
Yeah.
have them involved in projects that bring meaning and that create a better world for them and the world around them. And I'm not saying a cushy world, I'm saying a better world.
Mm-hmm.
I am blown away by the work that they are able and willing to do. And
Okay.
Chris Primo, who's the new CEO of Impact Society, is excellent
Yeah.
at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
There's
we
even
didn't get
one
to. We're gonna
question
have to have another whole conversation together. But I'm gonna
yeah,
let you go because I want to honor your time, and I'll just wrap up with everybody. I don't see
yeah,
any
you can
questions.
answer questions.
I see some great comments. I don't see any questions. So thank
Okay.
you, Barry,
Thank you.
for watching. And Barry actually is my guest next week, Barry Harris, and she is phenomenal within organizations and how to, how to bring the best out in teams. So we're going to talk about relationship and communication and how that affects team dynamic and toxicity in the workplace. So that's going to be next week. And I see Lee Jacobs, our old friend there, Jack. And when I say old, I wasn't speaking of her age. I was speaking
Yeah.
of we've known her a long time.
Yeah.
And so she was on, and I see a comment
Yeah.
from Marty. I see a comment from Corey Sinanen. So
Oh, super.
it seems like we have the world
Great.
here. So,
Well, thanks. I got to leave to be ready for the next one, but thanks so
okay.
much. Blessings.
Thanks. Talk to you later. All right. Oops, sorry. I was trying to get rid of that bottom third there, but that's okay. Yeah, so thank you everybody for joining. You can see kind of how the rhythm of this is going to go. And we really hope you can join us each week. And if you miss it for some reason live, by all means, you can still go and watch it on YouTube or on my Relationship Matters Facebook page. So if you Google Mark Gordon and Relationship Matters, you'll see all the places you can connect. My website's markgordon.ca, and you can find anything else I'm doing there. Now, I have another big announcement coming up soon. I don't know the exact week, so it may not be next week yet, but I have already filmed, and it's in editing right now, an online course called Relationship Matters, and it's the first part of the book. And I go into detail on the 5 pillars of a healthy relationship, and that's going to be available for sale. And I'm going to offer a huge discount for people that are watching on the live cast, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And anything else you want to find out, you can go to my website or hit me up directly. Again, I'm so grateful that you joined us, and I'm really looking forward to all the conversations we're going to have. We're going to run right through to the end of May, every Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And I know that you're going to enjoy. I've got some great guests lined up. And so thanks so much for joining, and we will see you next time.